Hello, you guys. My name is Alexandria, and my partner and I will be presenting the person-centered theory, which was founded by Mr. Carl Rogers. So let's just dive into his background real quick. Mr. Carl Rogers was born in Illinois on January the 8th in 1902. He was born to a very strict and religious family, and then later on in his life, he enrolled in a science department at the University of Wisconsin. After attending that university, he actually withdrew and he decided to go to the Teachers College at Columbia University, where he started to dig into the liberal and social ideas at the university. So Rogers, and it's very cool to me, Rogers was the first therapist, as we know of, to record his therapy sessions verbatim. Which is now a standard. So it's just like, he kind of laid out that red carpet for us. He published his ideas and clinical results in several books that are actually very known today. Digging into his background a little bit more, Mr. Rogers taught at the University of Chicago, Ohio, and the University of Wisconsin at Madison. So his work is widely known in the world of clinical psychology, which is another interesting, little fact. This type of therapy is also is often tied with the phrase, "How do you feel about that?" Or the phrase that we may use now, "How does that make you feel?" And we're going to dig into why that phrase may be always associated with that. Okay, so later in his years, Rogers was actually nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize because of his racial harmony and his world peace motivation that he had through his work. So yeah, if you can't tell, I have been falling in love with this guy, learning so much about him. So he also plays an important role in history and the developmental of our psychological world that we live in and study in now. He is one of the first, but he is not the first to propose comprehensive therapy about psychotherapy. My tongue gets tied a little bit. Prior to his work, a lot of therapy was focused on the therapist, where now the therapy is actually focused, this therapy theory is actually focused on the client themselves. So yeah. So one of another key figure besides Mr. Carl was his daughter, Natalie Rogers. Okay, so she took his therapy and kind of expanded it like slime, just got it big and messy, but in a good way in my eyes. So the person-centered therapy focused on the person a lot, but she took it and made it to be where it was expressive. So she did it with painting and sculpting and music and writing. So this was a way that she decided to help display one's healing process through finding different other ways to express yourself by just maybe talking or interacting with someone. Which, I don't know, y'all, it makes me excited because I feel like this is a therapy that actually works for a lot of people in diverse cultures that are not used to talking about their feelings all the time. So, yeah. Another key factor is Abraham Maslow. Him and Rogers had a lot of similarities when it came down to their theories. But in simpler terms, he was a humanistic psychology focused type of person, Mr. Maslow. And his idea was that once a person basically meets the needs, then they will venture out into the personal needs, the things that we need as humans. So, for example, when someone needs food, water, and shelter, they focus on getting that. They don't really focus on the other things. But once that is achieved, once the basic necessities are met, they go out and kind of want or try to find the needs that we need as human, which is like love and affection and stuff like that. I hope I'm making sense by that. But yeah, basically, the two of them became a little bit different when Rogers doesn't really credit the individual of self-actualization, but emphasize the necessities of the environment, especially through empathy and genuine. So it's like the outside result was Carl, and Maslow was like, this can all happen within you. Within you is fine. And Carl was like a little bit more open to other things around the person than just all to the person. Okay? So we're gonna go on and we're gonna dig more into the person-centered theory. So these are 5 things that kind of just gives you a overlook of the theory in general. And the first thing is self-direct growth. The next thing is this theory is done through the relationship between the helper and the client. So the helper is kind of identified as the therapist, or we can say social worker in some cases, and then the client. One of the main concepts of this is trust. The client must trust you when you're doing this therapy. You have to build some form of a safety net or a healthy relationship when dealing with this client. So this also, the 4th thing is also very big. I'm just gonna read it to you guys so you understand it. The actualizing tendency is present. I'm sorry, I'm getting tongue tied. It's present in every human. So we all have it in us. And then the 5th thing is individuals are basically in charge of their own lives. Whatever that you want to be, the ideal person within you, that is in us. We just have to get it out. Okay? So let's dig on. The thing that the person-centered theory really emphasizes is the fact that therapy as a journey is shared between 2 people. The person's intimate striving for self actualization. Sorry, again, tongue-tied. Personal characteristics of the therapy and quality of therapeutic relationships. The counselor's creation of permissive growth and promoting climate. And then people are capable of self-direct growth if involved in a therapeutic relationship. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm recording on my phone because it doesn't really work on my computer, and my PowerPoints are moving everywhere because it's touchscreen. So bear with me. I'm sorry. So those are things that it really just emphasizes. It's moving again. That it really just emphasizes. And I'm sorry again about this. Okay, so we're now going to focus on the key concepts with this theory. So around the person-centered approach, you must have realness, basically. You must be very transparent in a way that is very helpful when doing this approach. Also, along with this approach, you must have empathy for the client. You don't have to feel sorry for them, but just really get an understanding. And then being very positive. You have to be positive when doing this approach as well in order to get the best results, in his words. Okay, so right here we have some key points for you guys, and basically it says that Rogers believed that under nurturing conditions, a client will be able to move forward and resolve their own issues. So it's kind of like when you ask someone a question, or when someone is venting to you and they kind of give you the answer to their question already, if that makes sense. Like, man, I'm just not happy. And you're thinking in your head, like, how can I make them happy? And they, while you're thinking about that, like, I'm just not happy. I just wish I lived a better lifestyle. I wish I had was more financially stable. Well, they already answered their question to why they're not happy. You just have to help them get to the level that they want to be, in a way, if that makes sense. Okay? So, again, being very positive with this approach as well. And that this is a relationship between 2 people. the therapist and the client. The therapist or the client, or the social worker and the client if you use it in social work. So we're going to look at kind of what the environment has to look like, or what the environment must be to have this therapy or this theory, for this theory or therapy to have the best results. Okay, so being genuine again, being real while you're working with a client, being very positive, being very accepting, being very caring. But do not, although that you are being accepting, you're being caring, do not accept all of their behaviors, because you don't have to accept all of their behaviors. I don't want to say do not accept, but you don't have to accept all of their behaviors, because again, you must be real in this therapy, in this way of therapy. Okay, so having empathy and to deeply understand where your client is coming from, although you may have never experienced the things that they're experiencing, but be try your best to understand the world that they live in. Okay, the helper's attitudes are more important than knowledge. So you don't have, and I would guess you can kind of see this when this therapy is done one-on-one and not a professional setting. You don't have to know everything about, my brain and how I operate in the world. But the way that you're positive, the way that you treat me, the way that you uplift me is more beneficial than the knowledge, than the background, than the research. That makes sense. Okay? Remember again, positive, very positive. And then relating terms is acceptance of one's reality within, kindness, positive caring, prizing, and non-judgmental attitude. Okay, so I'm going to stop right there, and I am going to pass it to my partner.
It's Nicola Peters, and I'm going to be covering the second half of the person-centered theory. First, I'd like to let you guys know that I'm recording on my phone, so if it fall over, I apologize ahead of time. And the person-centered therapy is a form of psychotherapy, as you already know, developed by psychologist Carl Rogers. Originally, he named it the non-directive therapy, and then it was renamed client-centered therapy. This was because the non-directive could have suggested that there was no direction, yet Rogers believed it was the client's directions, experiences, and perceptions about their own reality. So the person-centered therapy is also known as person-centered psychotherapy, person-centered counseling, client-centered therapy, and the Rogerian psychotherapy. Okay, some of the basic assumptions about this form of therapy is the optimistic view of human nature. Another is that humans are growth-oriented, individualistic. Clients are in charge and responsible, always becoming, inner directedness, self-regard, conditions of worth are all the basic assumptions based around this theory or form of therapy. The important goals in this therapy would be the change from conditional positive regard to unconditional positive regard. So, and the next one will be experiences, aspects of self that were formerly denied or distorted. Also provide self-climate for self-exploration, recognizes blocks to growth, and enables to move forward towards openness and also for greater self-trust. Okay, the client-therapist relationship related to outcomes. The purpose of person-centered therapy is for the therapist to help a person self-actualize. In other words, you'll grow to believe that you can reach your full potential. This approach focuses on personal growth and facilitates healthy relationships. It can strengthen your sense of identity and help you connect better with others. The person-centered approach is fully supportive, so you'll have full support throughout this therapy. However, the therapist is not considered the expert. Unlike traditional psychoanalysts, in person-centered treatment, the client is an expert on themselves and the counselor is just an assistant. Your therapist would help you understand and explore yourself and your troubles. Their job is to create a psychological environment that feels physically and emotionally safe so that you can be open to the experience of therapy. And one reason Rogers rejected interpretation was that he believed that although symptoms did arise from past experiences, it was more useful for the client to focus on the present and future than on the past. Okay, so for a few techniques that goes along with this type of therapy is the focus is on the present moment and on experiencing and expressing feelings. Relationship is primary important. Warmth, genuineness, accurate empathy. So just not empathy, but accurate empathy. To be there for the client, and reflection of feelings, clarification, acceptance, active listening, caring confrontation. So, and accurate empathetic understanding. No formal diagnosis, but believes hampers therapy. So if there is a formal diagnosis, it's believed that it could hamper the therapy, person-centered therapy. So there are no basic techniques or practice of person-centered therapy. So what is essential for this is for the client's progress is the therapist's presence. Presence is what's key for the therapist. Being completely attentive to and immersed in the client as well as in the client's expressed concerns. Qualities and skills such as listening, accepting, respecting, understanding, and responding must be honest expressions by the therapist. Techniques may be suggested when doing so. Foster the process of client and therapist being together in an empathetic way. Techniques are not attempts at doing anything to a client. Rogers expected that the person-centered therapy to continue to evolve and support others in breaking new ground. But one of the main ways in which person-centered therapy has evolved is diversity, innovation, and individualization in the practice. The immediacy or addressing what is going on between the client and the therapist is highly valued in this approach. This development encourages the use of a wider variety of methods and allows considerable diversity in personal style among person-centered therapists. the shift towards genuineness enables the person-centered therapist both to practice in more flexible and integrative ways that suit their personalities, and to have greater flexibility in tailoring the counseling relationship to suit different clients. So that way it can be used in a variety of settings in, as far as culture goes. So those who practice the person-centered approach work in diverse ways and reflect both in advances in the theory and practice and different personal styles. And this is appropriate and fortunate. So the text says, for none of us can emulate the style of Carl Rogers and still be true to ourselves. If we strive to model our style after Rogers, and if that style does not fit for us, we are not being ourselves, and we're not being fully congruent. So you have to be yourself. The therapist has to be themselves in order to be have that immediacy in the therapeutic relationship with the client. They can't try to be someone else. If they're trying to be Rogers or emulate him, then that means they can't be themselves in that moment. They're trying to be like someone else. And that's the whole thing with the person-centered. The therapist has to be true and honest to themselves as well. One of the styles that are used is motivational interviewing, which is based on the philosophy of person-centered therapy, is a culturally sensitive approach that can be effective across population domains, including gender, age, ethnicity, and sexual orientation. Client-centered therapy operates according to 3 basic principles that reflect the attitude of the therapist to the client. Number 1 is the therapist is congruent with the client. And number 2, the therapist provides the client with unconditional positive regard. And number 3, the therapist shows an empathetic understanding to the client. And now, how's applied to the client population, the setting of treatment? Well, it can be in individual and group counseling, initial phases of crisis intervention. It could be marriage and family therapy. Parent or child relationships can also be used there, and human relationship training. Also, diverse cultural backgrounds, as I mentioned before. Because this therapy focuses on you as a person rather than on your problems. It focuses really on you. So in order for it, like I said, it focuses on you. It requires a supportive environment. When you're in Rogerian therapy, you can discuss any problems, any feelings, any past experiences, any hopes, dreams, and fears you like. The therapist is there to support you through it all. You and only you are the center of each session. So the therapist not only listens, but also reminds you in subtle ways that you are safe, appreciated, and you're valued. The strengths from the diversity perspective: empathy, the reflection, increased self-understanding, genuine, unconditional, positive regard, and acceptance. So person-centered therapy is considered to being ideally suited to clients in a diverse world. So it's preferably one that is more diverse than others, is basically what the text explains. And it has been translated into 12 different languages, so that shows the diversity there. And the emphasis is on core condition makes the person-centered approach useful and understanding diverse worldviews. So the person-centered philosophy is particularly appropriate for working with diverse client population because the counselor does not assume the role of expert, who is going to impose a right of way of being to the client. So the therapist could not impose their rights or morals on to the client. The client is actually leading here, because it is all centered around the client himself, him or herself. And it says here, the Rogers approach to therapy was a simpler one than the earlier approaches in some ways. Instead of requiring a therapist to dig deeper into the patient's unconscious mind, an inherently subjective process littered with room for error, he based his approach on the idea that perhaps the client's conscious mind was a better focus. In Rogers' own words, he's quote, "It is the client who knows what hurts, what direction to go, what problems are crucial, what experiences have been deeply buried. It began to occur to me that unless I had a need to demonstrate my own cleverness in learning, I would do better to rely upon the client for the direction of movement in the process." End quotes. And that was from Carl Rogers there. So the shortcomings from the diversity perspective, the person-centered approach has made significant contributions to counseling people from diverse social, political, cultural backgrounds. There are some shortcomings to practicing exclusively with this framework. Many clients who come to community mental health clinics, or who are involved in an outpatient treatment, want more structure than this approach provides. Clients often expect counselor to provide guidance or give them advice, and can be put off by this unstructured approach, because it's kind of considering that it's unstructured, because instead of the therapist leading, it's more the client leading instead of being directed. So there's no involvement or interference from the therapist, who might offer sound advice, which in some cases is difficult to translate the core therapeutic conditions into actual practices in certain cultures. For example, the expression of the therapist's congruence in empathy. Clients accustomed to indirect communication may not be comfortable with direct expressions or empathy or self-disclosure from the therapist's part. The focus on development of individual autonomy and personal growth may be viewed as being selfish in a culture that stresses the common good. Okay, so some of the limitation and criticism of the person-centered approach would be, some researchers have been critical of the methodological errors contained in some of these studies. Accusations of scientific shortcomings involved using control subjects who are could be involved in the therapy. So it wouldn't matter what. So anyone having any kind of issue with it, they don't have to have a diagnosis. And also failing to use untreated control groups, failing to account for placebo effects, reliance on self-reports as a major way to assess the outcomes of the therapy, and using inappropriate statistical procedures. So in all fairness, though, these accusations do apply to many other therapeutic approaches as well. So it's person-centered approach is not alone in those criticism and limitations. So before I end, I would like to let you guys have one more quote from Mr. Rogers. And it goes, again, we are deeply helpful when we risk ourselves as persons in the relationship. When we experience the other person as a person in his or her own right, only then is there a meeting at a depth that dissolves the pain of aloneness in both client and therapist. Thank you guys for listening to our person-centered therapy. Thank you.